Good morning, everyone. I'm Ann Murphy with Stem Cells Translational Medicine. We are delighted to welcome all of you on behalf of the journal. We're happy to host this webinar. This is the 10th anniversary of Stem Cells Translational Medicine with our founding editor, Dr. Atala, and I'll turn it over to you, Tony. Thank you, everyone, for being here.
Thank you, Ann, so much. Thank you. It's really a pleasure to have everybody here today for this program, and it's going to be an exciting program. I would like to again acknowledge Stem Cells Translational Medicine, the official journal for the Regenerative Medicine Manufacturing Society, for actually sponsoring this program today. And really such an important topic. Workforce development for RegenMed is one of the prevailing topics for the future of the field. And there's no one better to be able to direct this program than Dr. Gary Green. He is the Chief Workforce Development Officer for the Wake Forest Institute for Regenerative Medicine, as well as for the Regenerative Medicine Development Organization. And prior to joining W Firm, Dr. Green was president of Forsyth Technical Community College in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. This has been a regional and national leader in biotechnology education. Basically, through this program, they had a program through the Department of Labor and through the White House, where they developed a national program for biotechnology workforce development. And that actually included things such as nanotechnology and regenerative medicine. Dr. Green has presented on bioscience workforce development regionally, nationally, and internationally, including the White House, the Department of Labor, and many other conferences. He has appeared on CNN, C-SPAN, NPR, addressing education and workforce development issues. It gives me great pleasure to welcome all of you to this workshop, to thank Stem Cells Translational Medicine again for sponsoring this, and actually taking it off now to Dr. Gary Green to launch this conference for us. Thank you, Dr. Green.
Thank you, Dr. Atala, and thank you, Dr. Murphy, for your support and helping to sponsor the conference with the Regenerative Med Development Organization. I'm very pleased to be here, honored to be here with this august group of leaders in the regenerative medicine field. And what I would like to do today is share with you some information that was recently published by Stem Cells Translational Medicine, and in an article, and you'll see the link to the article coming into your chat this morning. But I would like to sort of do an overview of some of the skills that we have defined as needed for the regenerative medicine field, with particular focus on the skilled technical workforce. Though certainly the development of the workforce takes in everything from associate degree prepared technicians all the way through our graduate programs of with preparation for PhD, MDs, MBAs, and so on. We're going to focus somewhat on the skilled technical workforce. Just generally the objectives for today, I want to start off by identifying some elements in the field of regenerative medicine that are having an impact on the workforce today. Changes in the field bring changes in the needs for the workforce. Then we're going to review some recent research, both the recent work that was published in Stem Cell Translational Medicine and some of the foundational work that really led to that effort and supported that effort. And then look at what we do from here. What's a model to develop a network or an educational ecosystem for the development of that, and what issues need to be taken up by that ecosystem. Just as a matter of disclosure, no conflicts of interest exist. But I do want to recognize the National Science Foundation Advanced Technological Education Program for partial support for today's webinar. The 4 points about kind of where we are is observations about where the field of regenerative medicine is as it relates to workforce development. Obviously, RegenMed is a dynamic field, and this changing field requires changes in the workforce. First, as we move from research to clinical translation to scaled biomanufacturing, both with individual products and with thinking about the field as a whole, the skills needed for those for that change are varying. First, research is dominated by creativity. It's dominated by experimentation and by discovery, and that is true for the skilled technical workforce that supports the research function in regenerative medicine. As we move through the continuum and then enter clinical translation and the production associated with clinical translation, and ultimately scaled biomanufacturing, the skills are more dominated by processes that are highly routinized, repetitive, and where success and excellence is really determined by how those repetitious processes are done, and how we have lack of variability rather than creativity, lack of variability in the work, which means we need a different mindset among the technical workforce that supports those. Secondly, we need parallel career and educational pathways. Career pathways that may begin in our laboratories as skilled technicians, can continue with the right parallel educational pathways, can continue right on through leadership, whether it be research leadership or management leadership in clinical translation and in biomanufacturing, and with those educational programs associated with it, whether it be PhD, MD with the research focus, MBA, or other terminal programs. Then also the impact of converging technologies and multidisciplinary research and production is really dominating regenerative medicine and its development as a field today. And that shows up in the survey work that we've done and the research work we've done to identify the skills that are needed. But it complicates the role of the educational institutions and companies and institutes and other organizations to address the workforce challenge. As we think about the converging technologies and some of those areas, some of the areas that were identified in our study that we'll talk about further in just a few minutes, are areas like biomaterials, for example, where biomaterials synthesis, analysis, biochemistry composition, degradation, density, such, for example, nanotechnology, nanoscience, and nanomaterials are an important part of this field as well. So the convergence of those sciences and the convergence of those technologies with the traditional biology approach is very important. Bioinformatics and computer applications, another key component of biomanufacturing, clinical translation, and increasingly research as well. Data capture, analysis, imaging, modeling, simulation, cyber biosecurity are all part of these converging technologies that are making up what we think of as regenerative medicine today. And then thinking about the currency and the current skill status and where we are, where the gaps are, and really coming to understanding of where those elements are today. The work that ReMD, RegenMed Development Organization, and we did in furthering the research was really grounded in the work of the National Association of National Association of Business and Industry Associations, that association of associations really have framed the common employability skills. And these are the commonly known and understood skills that are needed, the people skills, the personal skills, the basic computational skills, the skills that are basic to any job in today's employment, form a foundation for developing the skills. And then I want to cite the work that the National Center for the Biotechnology Workforce, and you're going to have an opportunity to hear from Russell Reed, the Executive Director of NCBW later. But in 2016, the National Center for the Biotech Workforce published the core skills for bioscience technicians. And those core skills serve as a foundation for then the assessment of the technical skills associated with regenerative medicine that we've undertaken, that were published in Stem Cells Translational Medicine, and is part of our conversation today. In order to really to conduct the study, just a few words about methodology, and I won't get too deep into this. The article has that information, but we identified 36 technical skill items from previous research that had been done by surveying some selected leaders in the field, by looking at curricula as well. And in order to deal with 36 items in a significant way, these were clustered into 15 skill sets. And we'll address those 15 skill sets that you see in front of you. Those sort of naturally fell into a cluster of 4 groups: manufacturing operations management, which are the skills that are needed for production. And that production can be production for clinical translation or for scale biomanufacturing. Things like regulatory affairs, standards, validation, the need for systematic, organized documentation. And then, as I have heard Dr. Atala say a number of times, it all begins with the cell. So cell science, cell biology, stem cells, molecular biology, chromatography, all being a part of the cluster of cell science. And those are part of the core technical skills that are needed. Those convergent technologies, and these were some that I mentioned earlier, like bioprinting. Bioprinting really began and emerged from digital printing. And so bioprinting, biomechanics, bioinformatics and computer applications, biomaterials, the convergence of those mechanical and other systems with the biology in these convergent technologies. And then bioprocessing. And the way the items that we assessed fell out, we broke it into actually 3 parts, and oftentimes you see it in 2, but upstream bioprocessing, bioprocessor operations, and that is the actual operation of the bioprocessor, and downstream bioprocessing. So I would like to share with you some of the findings of our study, starting again with the biomanufacturing operations management skill cluster. 4 items that included regulatory, standards, validation, and documentation. And just a word on the presentation of the data here. The purple lines at the bottom indicate that the skills were not needed by the survey respondents. The green bar, or part of the bar, are the skills that were found to be needed, but that were currently available either in the workforce or in the labor pool in general. And then the red bars are the skills that are needed, but that are not available in the current workforce or not available in the labor market currently. And you see here very significant needs. Everything, all of the operational management items were seen as needed by employers by 85% or more of employers that responded. So they clearly touched on items that were needed in the workforce. The highest percent of overall need, not only for this cluster, but for the entire survey, was documentation. And that, I guess, sort of illustrates the dictum that if it's not documented, it didn't happen. So documentation was actually the single skill set that was seen as a need by the greatest number of respondents. The highest number of, or highest percentage of respondents addressing a skills gap or an unmet need was in the area of regulatory. And there you see almost 80%, or I'm sorry, almost 40% of respondents saying that they did not have and could not hire the skills that are needed with an understanding of the regulatory environment. In cell science, once again, you have in cell biology a need that's across the fields and across almost all employers. But one interesting and I think positive phenomenon that came out of the study was that if you look at the combined green and red bars here, you'll see that the core knowledge of cell biology is currently either available in the workforce or is available in the labor pool when it's available, as only 10% report difficulty in finding those skills in cell biology in the labor market. And then you see some similarity, but with a greater unmet need for molecular biology and for stem cells. The chromatography study is kind of an outlier that was addressed, in that approximately half of the employers that responded indicated that they did not have a need for chromatography understanding and skills. But of the 50% who did, you do see that there is over 20% of the total pool indicated that they did need chromatography and that was unavailable. So among employers, only half need chromatography, but for those who do need it, they find those skills often lacking in the labor pool. Convergent technologies are addressed briefly because it is sort of an overriding theme that you see through workforce development and regenerative medicine in general. The bioprinting, biomechanics, bioinformatics, computer applications, and biomaterials, all there exhibit significant unmet needs. With bioinformatics and bioapplications, not surprisingly, I guess, having the highest overall need with a large gap there of almost about 40% of the respondents saying that they do not have, cannot hire individuals with the digital skills. And I know that intersection of bioscience and information technology is happening across the entire biotech sector, but it's very pronounced in regenerative medicine area as we move to greater reliance on capturing and analyzing data, on predictive studies, and on partnerships with companies and with organizations that can bring that expertise to research, bring that expertise into clinical translation and scale biomanufacturing as well. So as the saying go today, all manufacturing is digital. That's true in the regenerative medicine field itself. Because of the strength of the need for technology, computer technology. Bioprocessing, you see the results here. Again, bioprocessor, bioprocess operations, the operation of bioprocessors being sort of the key in terms of the greatest need. If you separate out upstream and downstream bioprocessing, with 80% of the respondents showing a need for those skills, and again, about 35% unmet need, actually making it among one of the highest areas of unmet need for skills among the respondents. So just some broad sort of observations about these 4 clusters of 15 skill sets that were identified as making up the needs for the skilled technical workforce in regenerative medicine. 12 of the 15 skill sets were needed by 80% or more of employers. And what the takeaway from that is that the survey itself and the items that were identified and were presented to the skill sets that were presented to the respondents really did address those needs that they had. And then the greatest needs and the areas where it is most difficult for employers today to meet their skill needs are in the areas of biomanufacturing operations, in documentation, in validation, in standards, all of those areas, as well as the bioinformatics and computer application areas. And I would add to that the bioprocessing, particular bioprocessor operations. So how do we move forward? What do we do about it? How do we address it? Well, it begins, I think, with the development of the skilled technical workforce ecosystem. And ecosystems may be regional, they may be statewide, and we see efforts at statewide effort. They can also be national in terms of support for the right policies and the right investments and advocacy for the right interests to develop those that national ecosystem, and we'll hear a little more about that later. And the ecosystem really starts with K-12 and the other sources for our employee base, public workforce system, military connected individuals and underemployed individuals, all coming into an educational system that, as we move again from research, clinical translation to skilled manufacturing, is going to be dominated by the kinds of technicians that, at least initially, may be community college educated for entry-level positions. That can start with certificates, but it oftentimes starts with or has programs that build into associate degrees in areas like biotechnology, bioprocessing, and you see other names for those programs in the community college environment. An important connector to that and to initial employer is work-based learning. And work-based learning is very much an important part of the ecosystem. And this is where the partnership with employers and educational institutions come to bear. In order for the future employees to have an understanding of what the field of regenerative medicine looks like, what the work environment looks like, and have an understanding that can allow them to make informed decisions about education that can lead them into the regenerative medicine field. We need work-based learning. And work-based learning is not just that sort of high-end apprenticeship or internship or even shorter externships. It oftentimes starts with just exposure to the field. It starts with the tours that we have for high school students in our facilities. It starts with outreach from the higher education institution and employers into K-12 to begin to build familiarity. So that connection with the connection with it with work is very important. That can lead actually to regenerative med employment. And then that needs to be complemented with continuing education for the incumbent workforce that can include university baccalaureate education. Now, as the line kind of almost at the top of the chart there shows, students go from high schools to community college, students go to high schools, from high school to universities as well. So this is not a locked in place model, but as we think about how we achieve some broader goals of bringing more people into the regenerative medicine field, it's a positive look. And this model allows for the development of those foundational skills as well as the regenerative medicine technical skills that are needed. So how do we move that ecosystem ahead? Well, we start with faculty development at K-12, community colleges, and four-year colleges and university faculty. And I would say here that the development of the four-year and university faculty in our non-research one institutions is very important. Oftentimes in our major research institutions, you have bioengineering programs, and you have multiple options in biological sciences that can lead to degrees and graduate work. And you have facilities to support that you don't have in liberal arts colleges and even in other non-research one institutions. So the development broadly of faculty, K-12 to university, that can lead to curriculum development. And curriculum development entails programs and degrees, but it also entails component parts and elements that can be inserted into the curriculum, even into basic biology courses, to expose students to the work that occurs in regenerative medicine. So bringing regenerative medicine into the curriculum broadly, K-12 to university. The integration of work-based learning into that curriculum at all levels. Strengthening outreach to institutions that serve diverse populations. One of the values of bringing regenerative medicine to the community college curriculum broadly is that it exposes that broad, diverse population of students that start their higher education path in community colleges to regenerative medicine, and then ultimately builds a more diverse workforce. Bringing HBCUs and other minority serving institutions into our collaborations also helps to build a diverse population, which employers across the board are looking for. And then there's the development of the policy and advocacy agenda for regenerative workforce development. And you're going to hear more about that a little later in our session from really the experts on policy and advocacy going forward. So it would invite you, again, I included also the reference to the recently published article, and our thanks to Stem Cell Translational Medicine for publishing and disseminating the study on the skills needed going forward. And I want to thank the entire team that put our webinar together today, and the leaders that have joined us as a part of the program, and thank you for participating. With that, I would like to introduce the moderator for the next part of our session, Dr. Linnea Fletcher. Dr. Fletcher, I have known for a number of years now and had the real pleasure and honor to have worked with in the bioscience area. Dr. Fletcher began her education with an Associate of Science in Biology from El Camino Junior College, completed her bachelor's degree and other graduate work at the University of California, and then received her PhD in microbiology from the University of Texas. Pursuing her really passion for teaching and for students. She joined the faculty at Austin Community College as the biology department chair. And there she began the biotechnology associate degree at Austin. Linnea has done several, too many to mention in the time we have, has led several NSF projects, and even did a stint as a program director with the National Science Foundation ATE program. Currently, she is the PI for Innovate Bio, which is the National Center for the Biotechnology Education, which is NSF sponsored. So, Linnea, thank you for joining us and looking forward to your panel.
Thank you, Dr. Green. And I have to say, I'm very excited about being the moderator for the workforce panel. It's a stellar group of individuals. And I'm going to introduce all three of them so that we can move smoothly through all three presentations. And starting with Dr. DeKloe, who is the director and founder of the Industrial Biotechnology program at Solano College. And then Russ Reed, and you heard that he's the executive director of the National Center for the Biotechnology Workforce. He's also a co-PI on Innovate Bio. And then we have Andrew Breite, who is the director of quality assurance at VitaCyte. And I just met him yesterday, and his presentation is really thought-provoking concerning what is needed by the workforce to be able to do the job. Now, what I'm asking everyone, we have a lot of participants, and I really want to welcome all of the participants, is that you put your questions in chat, and we're hoping for a robust conversation after all of the presentations. And let's do a deeper dive into workforce, starting with Jim. Go for it.
Thank you, Linnea. So I'm going to tell a story. In 1994, I was teaching biology at Solano College, and Solano County is halfway between Sacramento and San Francisco. In the last census, it was formally designated the most diverse county in the state of California, which is the second most diverse state in the United States. So I was teaching biology, and Genentech announced they were going to build the largest cell culture manufacturing facility in the world in our county. So I went to them and I asked, what can I do to support workforce development for your company? And their answer was very different. I come from a molecular biology background, and I thought that biotechnology was molecular biology, but what they wanted was biomanufacturing, because that is what they were doing. They wanted a program that emphasized the skills and knowledge that Dr. Green talked about, that the skills and knowledge required for someone to enter the manufacturing sector of the biotech industry. And so I said, I'm not sure I know anything about it. I have a really classic academic background. And they said, come on down to South San Francisco and we'll teach you. And so I spent a year there with an industry internship. I was made a visiting scientist. They put me on the Vacaville team. And then I worked along students whose ink was drying on their bachelor's degree, that is recent employees, recently hired employees, and filled out batch records and followed good manufacturing practice and made tissue plasminogen activator and made Pulmozyme and made some of their now legacy products. So I took that knowledge back and interacting with their subject matter experts back to my college and built a biomanufacturing program, which was sort of unique at the time. And then, so that was 25 years ago. Now, fast forward to a few years ago, some of my graduates who were working at Genentech were being lured away by cell therapy companies, especially Juno in Seattle, and they gave them this amazing signing bonus. I thought, okay, you got my attention. So I thought, I've heard of this field, but cell therapy is really emerging as a dominant industry. And so I thought that I would add a component of our program in cell therapy. So we wrote a grant for NIMBLE, the National Institute for Innovation in the Manufacture of Biologics, and it had several components. It had a labor market information gathering component. It had a curriculum development component. It had a faculty train the trainer component. And let me talk about the labor market information first. And so what our strategy was here is to look at job postings and ask the question, what education level are they seeking, and what experience level are they seeking, and what skills are in the job posting. So we used the service Burning Glass Labor Insight, and we looked for both cell therapy and gene therapy for positions that required a bachelor's degree or less. And here are the companies that we worked with for developing curriculum. And so we recruited through Linnea's organization, through the National Consortium of Community and Technical Colleges that teach biotech, we recruited a college in each of the major hubs of cell therapy and gene therapy. And so Forsyth Tech in North Carolina, and North Carolina is exploding in these fields. Quincy College in the Boston area, Shoreline College in Seattle, and again, Juno was the company that first gained my attention. Mira Costa College in the cluster in San Diego County, Solano College in the San Francisco Bay Area, and then Montgomery County Community College in the Philadelphia area, in the suburbs of Philadelphia. And each one of these colleges held a session with subject matter experts from their neighboring fields, and we had them fill out surveys, and we gathered information and asked the question, what should go in a cell or a gene therapy curriculum? So labor market information giving us insight into the field and what industry needs their employees to know, and then asking the subject matter experts directly. Here's what we found in each of the regions that we looked at about the number of job listings over the decade. And I've grown enough cells to recognize exponential growth, although there was a little what we call a COVID dip. And then that was into 2000, and then in 2021, earlier this region, we ran it halfway through the year, and we're seeing an increase of 28% in growth in the number of job listings in Pennsylvania, 39% in North Carolina, 28% in California, 19% increase in Washington, and a 46% increase this year in Massachusetts. So there is a looming need for a workforce in cell therapy and in gene therapy and in regenerative medicine. I think that we have convincingly demonstrated that. So what are the job postings looking for? They're looking for mainly bachelor's degrees at the moment. Now, I have to say that when I started in biomanufacturing, Genentech said our technicians have bachelor's degrees, period. And as these technical training programs developed in community and technical colleges, as the industry got comfortable with them, they actually shifted to perhaps preferring an associate's degree. And when I was at Genentech, our manufacturing department had a 40% per year turnover rate. But when they looked within that, they found that the longevity of those that had an associate's degree was twice the longevity of someone with a bachelor's degree. That is, There was a typical pathway where someone graduated with a bachelor's degree from Berkeley, from Stanford, got a job with Genentech, worked there 2 years, applied to professional school and moved on. And what Genentech was looking for was an employee that was committed to the industry and committed to working into moving up in the industry. So I think this will change. Experience required as advertised, and they really are not looking for experience because the industry, I think, recognizes that there are very, very few people with this particular type of experience. So when we asked our subject matter experts in our 6 hubs, what do you need to know to go in as a technician in cell therapy? The intellectual knowledge, they had to know the fundamentals of cell biology, the fundamentals of immunology. They needed to know a general idea of cell therapy. Where is it going? Especially the difference between autologous CAR T and allogeneic CAR T, different cell therapies. They needed to know, as Dr. Green said, the fundamentals of biomanufacturing. What are the unit operations? What are the processes? And then they had to recognize what are the key differences in producing a cell therapy versus producing a traditional biotech protein product like a monoclonal antibody. The scale tends to be smaller. The operations tend to be more critical. You get one shot at the patient's cells and only one shot. And it is a high stress and a high pressure operation. It takes a particular person to do CAR T or to do some of the regenerative medicines where the starting material is limited. And the starting material is variable. Often you're getting it from patients. The patients have undergone chemotherapy multiple times, and it just is much more variable, and it is very limited. So when you do a quality control test, it should use a really small amount of material, because that material that you're taking for your test is material that can't go back to the patients. They looked for particular methods and particular pieces, a knowledge of particular pieces of equipment, apheresis, cell sorters. Prodigy is a particular system, it's a brand. How do you do density separation of cells? How do you do magnetic separation of cells? How do you select for cells? And then they especially want to know about the regulatory environment and how regulation of cell and tissue products is different than regulation of protein, of traditional biotech protein products like monoclonal antibodies. The students or their employees really need to know about good manufacturing practice, and again, coming up again and again, good documentation practices. If it wasn't written down, it didn't happen. Laboratory skills that they need to know. Just like in real estate, location, location, location. The laboratory skills that came out again and again: aseptic technique, aseptic technique, aseptic technique. Often you cannot terminally sterilize these products. You can't tolerate getting bacteria or any other organism in them. They need to know the basis of cell culture, especially the ability to work in a biosafety cabinet for open operations. They need to know about bioreactors, especially single-use bioreactors for cell expansion. They need to know about cryopreservation. The students need to know about gene delivery, gene editing, electroporation, CRISPR, the introduction using viral vectors, and then they need to know about the analytical techniques that are used in quality control. And these, again, are really small scale, because the material that you use for an analytical technique is material that is not going into the patient. So quantitative PCR, ELISA, flow cytometry, sterility, mycoplasma testing. So what we're doing is we're putting together curriculum that teaches all of these. We're going to spread it through Linnea's organization all around the United States. We are going to train the trainers and disseminate this to all of the faculty in the United States. We have a national consortium. We have a statewide consortium in California where we've started to do this, and have this curriculum boxed and ready to go for colleges all around the United States. The community colleges are ready. At Solano College, we have an incoming certificate and then stacked and lattice certificates, including a certificate in cell and gene therapy. We are a community college, but we were authorized to offer a bachelor's degree in biomanufacturing. And so that is seamless with other community college degrees. Beginning to end, that 4 years is under $10,000. And we've recently negotiated with universities for guaranteed enrollment of our students. We also have outreach to high schools with articulated high schools. So we have high school, certificate, associate's degree, bachelor's degree, graduate school, alpha to omega, from high school through PhD with multiple entry and exit points. And we are, California just authorized other colleges to do this. And so we are exporting this market, this model to other colleges. And thanks, and I'll pause there. Thanks, Linnea.
Thank you, Jim. And that was fantastic. Please put your questions in the chat. I started with a question, by the way. And now we move on to Russ.
Well, good day, everybody. It's a pleasure to be speaking with you, and I'm very excited to show a little bit about the work that we're doing here at the National Center for the Biotechnology Workforce, located here in Winston-Salem at Forsyth Technical Community College. I want to thank Dr. Green for inviting us to participate in this webinar. So what we're looking at is biomedical emerging technology application skills. And this is a grant that is now going into its year 4. And it's very important to just give a shout out to our partners here. Obviously, Forsyth Technical Community College, Ivy Tech out of Bloomington, and College of the Canyons out of Los Angeles, and Newbury Associates out of Minneapolis, Cook Regenerative out of the Cook Medical Company, and the North Carolina Biotechnology Center. I just want to make a point here before we switch this slide, which is very important. Anything that this center does is employee driven. And so what you see on the right-hand side beside the colleges are each of the trade associations that are linked to those particular colleges. So one of the best practices that I'd like to make sure that people see is that you work with your employers. We've heard it time and time again, but a way to get through to your employers is to use your trade associations. We've had a long-standing partnership with Dr. Atala and his group at the Wake Forest Institute for Regenerative Medicine. And I particularly want to thank Dr. Celeste Carter for our relationship with the NSF-ATE program, which is a spectacular program. And as Linnea said, we are strong workforce component of Innovate Bio. So what does beta skills really look at? Well, Dr. Green elucidated this in his talk, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but this is really the schema that really drove this grant. And it was really looking at those converging technologies. And if you think about this, this is 3.5 to 4 years ago that we actually put this design together. And of course, everything that has been spoken to today has come to fruition with respect to this. But what we're really concerned about with this grant is whether or not there are special skill sets for the interaction or the intersection between biomedical devices and tissue engineering as a good example. So how we do this, we have constantly dialogued with our industry. We took what were already in place because of our work with Department of Labor, medical device skill standards, and Dr. Green mentioned core bioscience skill standards. So what we're doing is looking very closely to try to make sure that we come through with a good definition of what are beta skills. And obviously things are moving along from research to manufacturing. And so, you know, there's an intersection there that we're looking at. But to give you a very good example, here's a picture in the upper right-hand corner of a bladder, which actually comes from the Institute for Regenerative Medicine. And then on the bottom, you can see a Medtronic insulin pump. So we say on the body or in the body. And that's what we're kind of very focused on. So after all our listening sessions, which have been done right across the country, either in survey form or face-to-face interviews just prior to COVID, we came up with what we feel and believe are our beta skills. And I'm not going to read them all for the sake of time, but the top ones that come through exactly mirror what Dr. Green has mentioned, and also Dr. DeKloe. So I think these are pretty consistent. The question really comes down to it now is, how do we implement these skills? And so from our perspective, what we like to do at this particular center is work with faculty. So we'll take faculty from high schools, we'll take faculty from community colleges, we'll bring them in. We're particularly effective at doing this with our industry partners. Prior to COVID, it would not be unusual that we'd actually have people here for a month, maybe sometimes a week, sometimes 3 weeks, but we would actually immerse them into an industry setting or an institutional setting so that they could really understand and really see and really appreciate what goes on with respect to industry. And so you see here a picture on the side of our people. These are actually community college instructors and high school instructors from across the country doing a professional development course that we had, which was, this is actually taking place in the Capstone Center, which is located at BTech at North Carolina State University. So one of the other things I just wanted to mention with respect to our skills and what we've been able to find out, and I think Andrew will probably elucidate this a little bit more, but it's also, there are people skills that are very, very important, and the ability to work in teams, to be flexible in learning and exercise good judgment is going to come up as a very strong indicator. So just very, very briefly now, just talk about some of the programs we've done and we're doing, and they exactly mirror what Dr. Green said in his outset, I should say, which is, we're looking at GMP, but a special emphasis on GDP, good documentation practices, and as well, nanobiotechnology that emerged as an important need in our group. Clinical research, but really clinical research with respect to biomedical devices, and cyber biosecurity. We had this in the past summer. We did it virtually, but we did it with industry, and I think it was extremely successful. Right now, for this summer, we're looking at getting back with people, which is really exciting. And what we're going to do is we're going to really put a lot of emphasis on the people skill part of what we're trying to get back down to the students. And so we're very, very excited about that. And if anybody is interested, they should contact me, and they can contact me through biotechworkforce.org, and we'll move on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Russ. And now let's move on to Andrew.
Thank you, Dr. Fletcher. And I want to thank everyone for participating in this panel today. As a representative of a small growing industry along the commercialization path, I think I've got a unique perspective that aligns with what's been discussed so far. There's been quite a focus so far on the technical expectations and requirements for industry. So I'm not going to expand on those too much, other than to essentially reemphasize what has already been presented by others in this panel so far. But I think at the top of the list, I would reemphasize the point of the self-centric mindset, training students and those early in their career to appreciate that biology always is the dictator of how our processes are designed, and the needs to encourage enable the therapy to work. Aseptic habits, again, I think this is far more than just a technique. This is needs to be something that is very much a habit, a very strong instinct to, at all costs, avoid any kind of contamination. As Dr. DeKloe mentioned, there is a lot riding on every single process that is executed with a limited sample size, maybe a one-shot opportunity for the manufacturing process. So aseptic habits as a fundamental ingrained habit is very important. One that I think doesn't get maybe a lot of attention, but I think is really quite relevant, especially when it comes to techniques that are going to need to be implemented for potency assessments of the cell therapy products, is a basic understanding of protein biochemistry. I don't know that we need to train protein experts necessarily, but there are some real fundamental basic understanding of protein biology that would be helpful in understanding how cells respond and how tests are designed and implemented. And then I would also focus on test results and interpretation of results. I think there is a tendency to execute on test procedures, especially for those that work in quality control settings, and focus simply on reporting numbers. But there's a need, I think, to develop skills in understanding what those results are really telling us. And that might be linked to next generation testing, or as different type of regulations may require in the future, the ability to make sense out of what the test results really mean. The other element that industry really needs from trainees is an understanding of quality. And I think that there's kind of two aspects of quality. One is obviously the very tangible output of a good documentation practice, but there's also a philosophy element that underlies how problems are evaluated, risks are assessed, and potential solutions are implemented. You know, this is going to be very different for each organization, but ideally, the company will recognize that quality is a very ingrained part of their culture, and we need to prepare students to look for that and how they align with the quality as a philosophy. Quality by design has taken hold in biopharma design and manufacturing, and it would be beneficial to ensure that students are prepared to understand the drivers behind this process and really embrace how it designs established processes. There's a need to also really understand process risks. You can, there's a need, I think, to introduce students to ICHQ-9, which is the guidance on identifying and assessing risks, and a student or a trainee that is well prepared to recognize the risks of the process is one that's going to be very valuable to the organization. Trend monitoring, you know, Dr. Green earlier alluded to biomanufacturing processes as being established routine processes, but that doesn't mean there aren't trends within those established processes. And the ability to recognize trends that may be occurring that need to be monitored for continuous improvement or an opportunity to make things more effective is a very valuable contribution to the organization. And from my perspective, we really look for individuals to become subject matter experts that really want to own their process. So this really underscores the need to develop not just technical skills, but translate those into the context by which you apply those technical skills. Become passionately engaged in the process that is under their responsibility. We're really looking for people that can become subject matter experts on their process. I also think that there's a role for industry to play here. there is a need to for industry to develop and revise meaningful and timely curricula relevant to the academic institutions, and there's a need for them to more strongly engage. There's also an opportunity to really foster enthusiasm for the fields and see it as an opportunity to develop a rewarding and lucrative career path. Align roles with recruitment expectations, with the candidate pool that is available, and facilitate the productive training for developing the ideal candidates. What I'm suggesting here is the industry has a part in closing the gap of the limitations they see in the candidate pool. So kind of the takeaway message here is the need to train for a value-added mindset, prepare students not just for the task performed, but really the value that they're going to be adding. The technical skills are a foundation for adding that value, but there is a need for the trainee to proactively identify where they fit in the organization in the context of those processes and how they add value, and then relate those processes to meaningful and relevant quality metrics. So I'll leave it there, Dr. Fletcher.
Thank you so much, Andrew. And I just want to say that Andrew's comments really hit home to me, because essentially that means that you have to own your process. And thank you so much, Andrew. And it seems that we have run out of time for discussion. I just want to verify that with Gary. And so all the questions that were posted in chat, we may have to have individuals email the specific panelists themselves for answers.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Those are great presentations, Linnea, and for all the other participants. But we want to make sure we keep things covered. But we will follow up on the questions that come in the chat. So this is not an end point today. But please put your questions, your comments in, because it'll help guide future work that we do. So thank you.
And let me just say that, sorry, Andrew, I know you were the last panelist, and so you kind of got a little shorter on the deal, but as I really appreciate your presentation. So as we move forward.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I want to introduce Dr. Atala, who's Director of Wake Forest Regenerative Medicine. He will be the moderator for the next panel. And again, thank you all for participating.
Thank you so much. It's great to be with all of you back again for this next panel discussion. This is going to be a really very interesting discussion that I think you will find highly relevant to the topic today. So we're going to go ahead and get started with the first question. And I'd like to first introduce our panelists, Janet Murphy-Broda, who and as well as Celeste Carter, as well as Bernie Siegel. And we're going to go ahead and make those introductions as we start the question. So it's welcome, our panelists. Great to have all of you today, and thank you for being part of this. So now what we're going to do is actually go to the first question. And the first question is, what are the consequences if we fail to develop a workforce? And I'm going to ask our first panelist to do this, Bernie Siegel, the Executive Director of the Regenerative Medicine Foundation, which is a nonprofit with the mission of accelerating regenerative medicine to improve health and deliver cures. Bernie, I'd love for you to answer this if you could.
Well, thank you, Tony. I think looming large over this meeting today that we're having is the understanding that workforce development and the training of the technical workforce for regenerative medicine is a giant unmet need. And as an unmet need, it represents to the field a bottleneck. If you believe, as I do, as a patient advocate and an observer of the field for over 20 years, that regenerative medicine represents real hope, curative hope, and these new technologies and convergence of technologies will sweep and change medicine and human health forever. Most of us involved in the field realize that potential. Society as a whole might not. So the consequence of losing momentum because we don't have a trained, skilled workforce is urgent to remedy. And we need to bring, as a community, I submit, this urgency to the broader industry, leaders, lawmakers, and society as a whole.
Great, thank you, Bernie. I'm going to ask the same question from Janet Marchi-Broda. She serves as the president of Alliance for Cell Therapy Now, an independent nonprofit organization devoted to advancing the development and delivery of safe and effective cell-based therapies to patients in need. She also serves as a fellow for the Bipartisan Policy Center and as a senior advisor and executive director for the NFL Alumni Health. So Janet, again, great to have you with us today and love for you to answer this question. What are the consequences if we fail to develop a workforce?
Well, Tony, let me say how delighted I am to be joining you and to be talking about this topic specifically. I spend most of my time advocating for our country, the federal government, the private sector, to further advance these therapies. I mean, it's very exciting to see all of the discoveries and the emerging results from clinical trials across the broad range of cell-based therapies. But where, if we are able to fund and bring, there's a lot of discussion around optimizing manufacturing in addition to funding the clinical trials. But if we get there and we're not able to deliver to patients because of lack of workforce, then it will all be for naught. So I feel that there are huge consequences for not thinking ahead as we are today in this conference and all of your leadership and work around this issue, and not thinking about workforce. So incredibly important.
Great. Thank you so much, Janet. And same question for Celeste Carter. Celeste, it's great again to see you today, and thank you again for being part of this panel. She received her PhD in microbiology from Penn State University School of Medicine in 1982. She works at the NSF, and she accepted a permanent program director position in the Division of Undergraduate Education and directs the Advanced Technological Education Program, ATE, as well as working on other programs in the division and across the foundation. Celeste, thanks again.
All right, let me jump in. So thank you, Dr. Atala, and it's a great pleasure to be here. And as Dr. Atala said, I am a permanent program officer at the National Science Foundation, and I am the lead program director for the Advanced Technological Education Program, which you've heard about. Innovate Bio, which is funded by the ATE program. You had Linnea Fletcher as your moderator, and Jim DeKloe and Russ have also been supported by the ATE program. It is a program that specifically looks at educating the skilled technical workforce, but in addition can cover grades 7 through 12 all the way through 4-year. So it's a fairly broad program, but thinking about developing a workforce obviously is critical. I think you've heard both from Bernie and Janet that this is absolutely essential. I guess I would like to mention one of what I see as part of the bottleneck. It's critical to develop this workforce, where and who should be involved. And we've heard about industry, we've heard about having partnerships, we've heard about bringing in education and industry together. And I think one of the things to think of as a challenge is making sure that the number of people who can participate and understand the importance of this workforce actually have a place in programs. That I think is one of the things. I ran a biotechnology program myself in California, pretty close to Solano College, where Jim DeKloe is. We knew each other then, and the maximum number of students that could go through a program was usually around 24. You can't really put more students in a program. So if you think about that and then think about, okay, so whose role is this? Are we going to have community and technical colleges as the primary educator?
as we're talking about with the skilled technical workforce, how many community and technical colleges are there? Well, there's close to 1,200 across the United States, but obviously not all of them are in those sort of hot spots for gene and cell therapy and thinking about regenerative medicine. So I think I just wanted to add in as sort of a different take, is thinking about impacting the institutions themselves to think about developing these programs. So let me stop there and I'll move back to Dr. Atala.
Thank you so much. Excellent. So I guess, Janet, this is for you, being that we're talking about the challenges and the systems that can be in place. Do policymakers recognize the need for further investments in workforce development? And can you describe some of the policies that already exist in legislation or are being proposed?
So, Dr. Atala, I think policymakers do recognize the need for investments in workforce development generally, but with a caveat. I mean, if you just, I guess Friday night, Congress finally passed the infrastructure bill, and they've been working on this Build Back Better framework, and there's a ton, billions and billions of dollars for workforce development if they're able to get to the finish line. And you know, it's a tough, there is not broad consensus around the dollars or what's in the bill yet, but hopefully they'll get there. But that's around workforce generally. You'll also see, if you were to go back to any of the spending bills over the last several years, including what the House just passed this summer and what's in the Senate draft, you'll see a lot of investment in workforce development, but it's primarily in areas, it's not in this area. There's very little, but the bottom line, but you can see, and this gets to what should we do, probably one of our last questions, there's a huge amount of funding in the public health workforce as we became aware of all of the vulnerabilities in our system and the lack of investment there. I would say, so let's talk about biomanufacturing and regenerative medicine in particular. Very little, unfortunately, and we need to change that. The stem cell outcomes, the Transplant Act, they relabeled it. This is an act that's been in place since 2005 for the first time, had the creation of a GAO report, no money, but creation of a GAO report that would actually look at current employment levels, a lot of the things that Gary shared with us earlier, your article and your research, identification of gaps, an overview of availability of training programs. Wasn't a lot, but a lot of times, if you're a person who works in advocacy, a lot of our work sort of in getting to the big funding levels tend to start with a GAO report or some sort of report or a committee, or what used to be, the National Academy of Medicine doing a report or the like. And so I am, I'm hopeful that will lay the groundwork. And I do have to make a little plug. The Alliance was able to get some language both in the House bill that was passed and in the Senate draft. And the Senate draft does contain a blurb about workforce development and regenerative medicine. No funding yet, and we've got a long way to go. But long answer. Generally, yes, we've got more work to do here.
Great, thank you so much. Certainly a great effort to get that on the language. So that's a big step forward. Celeste, you're right in the government. So in terms of the NSF, any thoughts at your end in terms of funding for this area?
So I can speak a little bit about the ATE program. I would welcome more proposals coming into this program, developing programs, addressing the skills shortages. But I think one of the things that is interesting, this is a new area, right? What happens when, say, the Bureau of Labor Statistics or someone goes to ONET and says, well, what are these jobs? I need to find some data on what's actually happening out there. And one of the things that is pretty evident is that there aren't a lot of ONET codes for some of these new and emerging areas. And I think that thinking about what the general public could do, one of the things possible would be to say, educate your legislators about the need for updating things like ONET skills so that we can actually gather some of this data and have a better position to actually push forward and say that we need more information, we need more dollars going to these kinds of programs, all of that sort of thing. I think that's something that we could all look at and do.
That's great. Thank you. So, Bernie, you're involved in so many aspects of the field. So what do you think is the communication strategy of key stakeholders to the general public, educational leadership, and industry?
Communications is going to be everything, because I refer to it as communication/promotion. All information is diluted instantly, right, in the information age. But to give you an idea first of the challenge we face in communicating, I dug up a seminal article, right, that I thought was really important by our friend Dr. Chris Mason from 2011. And the title of the article is Cell Therapy Industry, Billion-Dollar Global Business with Unlimited Potential. That was a decade ago. And of course, he refers to the field of cell therapies as another pillar of medicine, drugs, biologics, medical devices. And cell therapies represent something new and much more challenging to get into practice, regulatory, reimbursement, all of these issues. And that spawned really a growth of an industry sector. So there's this group called the Alliance for Regenerative Medicine that publishes sector analysis. And in just looking at that this afternoon, we see that they're reporting a record year of a half year of $14 billion in sector financing for this field. In 2020, 19 billion. In 2019, 10 billion. 2018, 14 billion. In other words, this field is taking off like a SpaceX rocket. That being the case, there's a dynamic industry that's growing with huge regulatory challenges. It's not just hiking up Mount Everest, it's crossing the Himalayas sometimes when you think about getting cell therapies through. So this great influx of money, including a huge amount of startups that aren't even being included in these numbers, how are they going to get to the finish line in this? Well, when this breaks through, when we break through these obstacles and these cells become therapies and start to get into widespread use, and of course, fulfill the goal of being potentially or actually curative, it's going to be a tremendous geopolitical question as well, as it is already. So what are our communication strategies? We have to recognize that in the United States, we have to be competitive with China. We have to understand what the world is doing to accelerate this and compare and contrast their work and our own work. We have to be able to message this clearly as for what it is. And we have to look at the collaborative efforts such as, and look at the success of the California Institute for Regenerative Medicine, which just recently passed a statewide initiative for another $5 billion to promote the field. There are models out there, and in every state in the union, remembering Justice Louis Brandeis said that states are the great laboratories of democracy, and every single state, there are things happening with biotechnology, the growth of the workforce there. We have to expand those programs. The way to do it is to confer with lawmakers, and most importantly, I would submit, the patient advocates community, the disease advocacy groups, and the medical philanthropies that see this as really important. They are aligned with this interest. There are obstacles. We have to ask ourselves whose ox is being gored, who is challenged by all of this moving forward. But it is imperative that we view this, especially in the community on this call, as a priority. And I can tell you, as the community is educated, that workforce development is critical. People are going to start paying attention.
Thank you, Bernie. I know we only have like 1 more minute, so I'm going to have just 2 quick questions. The first one is for Janet. Janet, what can we learn from other workforce development efforts in other fields to inform policy efforts in RegenMed? If you could do a quick response, that would be great.
Yes, really quickly. So I, often refer to what we did in the health information technology industry. Government put $40 billion into electronic health records. Industry, the manufacturers, the health systems were saying, we don't have a trained workforce. We're not going to be able to get there. And I think what we learned, they had many models that worked. They created certificate programs within community colleges. They helped universities with grants and programs. But I think in the little time we have left, we need a larger coalition that includes the employers of these technologies, the manufacturing companies, that raises awareness of the promise of regenerative medicine, and sort of, I don't think we have awareness where we need it on Capitol Hill right now, and we're going to need that in order to drive more funding, to, both from the public and private sectors, into workforce development.
Thank you, Janet. And Celeste, what you're doing with the ATE program is so important, so relevant to this effort. So NSF developed the ATE program in response to the Scientific and Advanced Technology Act of 1992. That was almost 30 years ago. Are NSF, Congress, and administration interested in continuing this program?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, in a very bipartisan effort, bills were passed both in the Senate and the House last year. The bill's being reconciled at this point, and hopefully will go for signing to reauthorize the ATE program for the first time since it was authorized in '92. One of the things in this bill is that it would double the funding for the program. So it would move from 75 million a year to 150 million a year. I kind of gasped and said, I hope you're not planning on doing that all at once. Because the big thing is we need proposal pressure. So my pitch is that we need more people thinking about this area, understanding the relevance, understanding the need for the workforce, and actually crafting proposals. And I would turn it back and say, you listen to that first panel of people, all of those people will mentor new potential prospective PIs coming in, developing programs, reaching out to industry. And I guess the last thing I would say would be the importance of the partnerships. ATE functions because it has close partnerships, committed partnerships between industry and education. And I think that works both ways, where there's a return on investment for both parties. And I think that that's another critical thing that ATE really has been sort of a banner success over the years, and something that really needs to continue. So yes, ATE, I'm waiting. I keep getting calls from the different committees going, okay, so does this word mean the same thing that we think it does? And hopefully that'll go through soon.
That's great, terrific. It's good to see that there is a bright future ahead. This is an amazingly complex area, but emerging and exciting. And it's really good to have all of you in the panel today. Celeste Carter, Janet Murphy-Broda, Bernie Siegel, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
I'll pass it on to Gary now. Gary Green.
Thank you, Dr. Atala, and thank you to all of our panelists today. One of the things that want to mention as we close is this is really the beginning of a conversation. And that's why your chat items were so important to us. But we want to continue this, that we will be initiating a series of webinars with the support of NSF and others quarterly over the next couple of years. And so we're very interested in how we support the field through these vehicles, and we want to continue the conversations around policy and advocacy and how we move the entire field forward. So I would invite you to keep an eye on announcements through remdo.org. That's remdo.org, the site for Regenerative Medicine Development Organization for upcoming events. And also the recording of today's webinar will be on remdo.org as well. With that, I'm going to also turn it over to Dr. Murphy again for comments, but thank all of you for joining us and hope you'll stay with us for just a couple of more minutes as we get some information from you. So Dr. Murphy, thank you for the support of Stem Cells Translational Medicine as we partnered for this event.
It was our pleasure, Gary. Thank you, first of all, for authoring that wonderful article that became the genesis of this webinar. That is, and thank you for assembling such a magnificent expert faculty. The panel discussions were excellent. And for us, for all of us, this is now a wonderful call to action. And we just want to tell you that we are here to help and support in any way we can. So thank you all. This was so inspiring.
Well, thank you, Ann. I appreciate those kind remarks, and thanks to all of you again. At this time, before you leave our panel, I want to ask you to evaluate your experience with the webinar today. You see popped up on your screen, and these are just about 3 questions. So please take just a moment and answer these questions.